Shalom, Bezrat Hashem. Today I will go through the Ytro-The, the 10 Commandments from Parashat Yitro, chapter 20, Perek Chaf, Psukim Aleph, V'chulu. Chapter 20, verse 1. וידבר אלוקים את כל הדברים האלה לאמור. God spoke all these words, the Ytro-The, 10 Commandments, from out of the darkness, the fire, and the cloud that covered the mountaintop. And the Jewish people, they responded to the preceptive commandments by saying, yes, we will, and to the prohibitory commandments by saying, no, we will not. Am Yisrael anu, למצוות עשה כן נעשה, ולמצוות לא תעשה לא נעשה. In other words, לא נעבור את המצוות לא תעשה. Now I will begin with the 10 Commandments. The first commandment. אנוכי השם אלוקיך אשר הוצאתיך מארץ מצרים מבית עבדים. This is pasuk bet. אנוכי השם אלוקיך אשר הוצאתיך מארץ מצרים מבית עבדים. Says God, the first commandment, I am God, your God. What this means is that now you are officially, the Jewish people are officially obligated to fulfill all of the commandments of God. Nevertheless, however, your relationship with God is not merely a contract. It's not just a contract. You do not consummate it simply by discharging your legal obligations to me. In other words, you don't keep your agreement to me by doing your legal obligations to me. Why? Because I am the one who brought you out of Egypt, out of the house of Paro. God says, God is the one who brought us out of Egypt, out of the house of Paro, where the Jewish people were slaves. By freeing the Jewish people from Egyptian slavery, God made, in effect, the Jewish people into God's slaves. Now the Jewish people are God's slaves rather than slaves of Paro, since God freed them from Egyptian bondage. So the lives, he's saying to the Jewish people, your lives are from now on to be totally oriented. Okay, that the Jewish people's lives now have to be totally oriented towards your divine mission, the mission we have to do, the godly mission that we have to do in this world, and you no longer have any private lives at all. That's what God is saying. So, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, in simple English, is that now we're officially obligated to do all the mitzvot, all the commandments. But it's not just like a contract where we have to fulfill the contract, what is stated therein in the contract and the agreement, but it's more than that, much more than that. It's that God brought the Jewish people out of Egyptian bondage. He freed the Jewish people from Egyptian bondage, and now the Jewish people are legally God's slaves. And therefore, now we must be totally oriented towards our mission, our mission that God put us into this world for, and we have no private lives at all. We have to be totally dedicated and given over to and focused upon fulfilling our mission. Now, the second commandment is Pasuk Gimel, Lo yelecha elokim acherim al panai. The second commandment, you must not possess any idols of other people's deities, other people's, they believe in idolatry, as long as I exist, as long as God is, and ever, wherever I may be, anywhere. In other words, ever and anywhere, a Jew may, and all those, may not possess an idol. And these deities, these idols and fake gods are worthless. They don't answer to those who call upon them. That's the second commandment, the third commandment now. I got mixed up because of the psukim. Pasuk Daled, the third commandment. You must not make yourself, it's not the third commandment. It's a continuation. Pasuk Daled, you must not make yourself lo ta'aseh lecha fesed v'chol temuna asher b'shamayim mima'al v'asher ba'aretz mitachat v'asher b'mayim mitachat la'aretz. And I'm going to carry on reading the psukim in Ivri, in Lashon HaKodesh. Lo tishtachave lahem ve'lo ta'ovdem ki anochi Hashem Elokecha ke'elkana poked avon avot al panim ashilashim el ribeim lesone'ai v'oseh chesed la'alafim le'ohavai u'leshomrei mitzvotai. Now, Pasuk 4, again, we're in the midst of the second commandment still. We said already you may not possess, you mustn't have any idols. They're worthless. You're never allowed to have any idols in your possession. Pasuk 4, continuing the second commandment, you must not make yourself a sculpted image or any other type of likeness of anything that is in heaven above or on earth below or in the water lower than the earth surrounding it, even if your intention is not to worship it. And if other people make such idols, you mustn't bow down before it, prostrate yourself before them. You mustn't bow down before it, nor worship those idols of other people, because God, your God, is a zealous God. Kel kano, in this regard. God is a zealous God. For those who hate me and worship idols, so God says that those who hate God, chas v'shalom, and worship idols, I'm a God who remembers the premeditated sins of the fathers. He remembers the sins that were premeditated of the fathers before us, adding their demerits, D-E-M-E-R-I-T-S, not merits, right, the opposite, to those of their descendants, but only up to the third or fourth generation, and only if these descendants also worship idols. So he brings it together with the fathers who worshipped idols together with the descendants. Verse Vav, Pasuk Vav, V'oseh chesed la'alafim. But in contrast, says God, I am a God, says God, who shows kindness for at least 2,000 generations to the descendants, the children of those who love me and worship me alone out of that love, and for 1,000 generations to the descendants of those who observe my commandments solely, only out of fear or respect. This is the difference between being motivated by love and being motivated by fear or respect. So again, when it comes to those who love God, so God shows kindness for at least 2,000 generations to those descendants of those, the children of those who love God and worship God only out of love. And for those who observe the commandments only out of fear or respect, for 1,000 generations. Now we'll carry on. Now we're actually up to the third commandment. Pasuk Zayin. Lo tisa et Shem Hashem Elokecha lashav, ki lo yenakeh Hashem et asher yisa et Shemo lashav. In English, the third commandment now. You must respect God's name, the Tetragrammaton. You must not swear by the name of God, your God, in vain. By using it, in other words, you mustn't use God's name, swearing in vain, by using it to swear that something is something that is manifestly true. For example, you mustn't swear that a tree is a rock using God's name, the Tetragrammaton, because God will not absolve anyone who swears by his name in vain. That's the third commandment. Now we're going to get to the fourth commandment. Pasuk Chet. Zachor et Yom HaShabbat lekadesho. The fourth commandment is remember and observe. That's what Zachor means. The connotation of Zachor, remember, is remember and observe the Shabbat day continuously, by thereby keeping it holy. So how do you remember it, the Yom HaShabbat, the day of Shabbat? By anticipating, by looking forward to the arrival of the Shabbat during the week before the Shabbat. So for example, if you come across some special food, special fish, any food item, then designate it, set it aside, keep it for the Shabbat. That's how you remember the Shabbat. Observing the Shabbat means refraining from doing on the Shabbat all the prohibited labors that are forbidden on the Shabbat. That's how you observe the Shabbat. We're still not finished with the fourth commandment. Pasuk Tet now. Sheshet yamim ta'avod ve'asita kol melachtecha. Pasuk Yud. Ve'yom ha'shevi'i Shabbat la'Hashem Elokecha. Lo ta'aseh chol melacha ata uvincha uvitecha avdecha v'amatecha uvehemtecha ve'gerecha asher bish'arecha. 6 days you must work and do all your work. But even if you haven't finished all your work during the 6 preceding work days, even if you didn't finish your work, nevertheless, the 7th day is the Shabbat. And that day is dedicated to God, to Hashem, your God. You should behave on the Shabbat as if all your work, all your work, your parnasah, has been completed from the week. You mustn't do any work, neither you, nor your son, nor your daughter, even though your children aren't technically obligated to observe the mitzvot until they attain majority, halachically, legally, right, until they become bar mitzvot. Nevertheless, or actually rather we should say before, very, very young, when they're babies, for example. Nevertheless, you mustn't allow them to do any form of forbidden work when they are babies. Your bondmen and your bondwomen are forbidden to work, since they are obligated to observe all the prohibitions that you are. You may also not make your animals work on the Shabbat. The resident alien who is permitted to live within your gates is also forbidden to work, although not to the same extent that you are. Now, I didn't read this pasuk in Lashon HaKodesh properly. I'll just do it quickly. I read it too fast. V'yom hashvi'i Shabbat l'Hashem Elokecha lo ta'aseh chol melacha ata uvincha uvitecha avdecha v'amatecha v'emtecha v'gerecha asher b'sharecha. Now that you've heard the English, you hear the Lashon HaKodesh again, and you understand it better. We're still in the middle of the fourth commandment. Pasuk Yud Aleph. Ki sheshet yamim asa Hashem et hashamayim ve'et haaretz et hayam ve'et kol asher bam vayanach bayom hashevi'i al ken berach Hashem et yom hashabbat vayekadeshehu. For in 6 days God made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and all that is within them. And God rested, so to speak, on the 7th day, even though he didn't need to rest, since God did not become tired. Of course, by creating the world, God didn't become tired. Nevertheless, he rested on the Shabbat on the 7th day. But why did he rested? In order to set an example for the Jewish people. God therefore blessed the Shabbat day by ordaining that in the future a double portion of manna, of man, would fall on Friday, so that you have for Friday manna and also for the Shabbat. And this is what happened, as you have seen. And God sanctified it, the Shabbat, by ordaining that in the future, no manna would fall on the Shabbat. The fact that no manna would fall on the Shabbat, also in the future, prevents us from pursuing, from running after our material needs, monetarily needs, even if we wanted to. And this too happened, as you have seen. That's the fourth commandment, in brief. The fifth commandment, Pasuk Yud Bet, Kabed et avicha v'et imecha lema'an ya'arichun yamecha al adama asher Hashem Elokecha noten lach. Honor your father and your mother, so that your days will be lengthened in the land that God, your God, is giving you. The opposite is also true. If you do not honor your parents, lo aleinu, your days will be shortened. Pasuk Yud Gimel. Lo tirtzach, I'll carry on, lo tin'af, lo tignov, lo ta'aneh v're'acha ed shaker. Lo tachmod beit re'echa, lo tachmod eshet re'echa ve'avdo v'amato v'shoro v'chamoro b'chol asher le're'echa. You must not murder. The sixth commandment, you must not murder. The seventh commandment, you must not commit adultery. You mustn't have extramarital relations with a married woman. The eighth commandment, verse 13, we're in the middle of verse 13, Pasuk Yud Gimel. The eighth commandment, you must not steal people, you must not kidnap people. That's what it means, lo tignov here. The ninth commandment, you must not bear false witness against your fellow man. Okay? Lo tirtzach, lo tin'af, lo tignov. לא תענה ורעך עד שקר. לא תחמוד בעת רעך, לא תחמוד אשת רעך ועבדו ומתו, ושורו וחמור וכל אשר לרעך. And we're in Pasuk Yudalit still, 14. The 10th commandment, you must not desire your fellow man's house. You must not desire your fellow man's wife, his bondman, his bondwoman, his ox, his donkey, or anything else belonging to your fellow man. This is from the Kehat Chumash, and I hope this gives you clarity, understanding the Aseret HaDibrot from this parasha, that we should keep the Aseret HaDibrot and all the Torah, and we should merit the Geula Amitit V'Shlema Techuf Miyad Mamash.